Hello YouTube and welcome back. I'm going to do another session study. This one for an older tune that I wrote. If I had to take a guess, maybe 8 years ago. And this is for a game called Pirate 101. It's from the makers of Wizard 101, King's Isle. This is a combat tune from Pirate 101. Combat, not for the skyways where they battle each other in ships, but for ground-based combat. And this is for a level called Cool Ranch. The developer wanted the music to sound like the score from one of the spaghetti westerns back in the 50s and 60s, which were cowboy movies, but they were usually made in another country where it was cheaper to film them. I guess Italy was a popular destination because it kind of looked like the American West, and they could film there more cheaply. Consequently, the composer for a lot of these films was a gentleman by the name of Ennio Morricone, who is a legend because of these scores. They're really creative and very unusual, using some of a lot of more modern instruments from the 60s, the electric guitar. He used a lot of very odd techniques, vocal techniques, and it sounded like, the Westerns, but it wasn't just confined to American music of that time. So it was a lot of fun getting to look at the scores from movies like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and A Fistful of Dollars, and try and figure out what made that composition sound so unique and interesting. So let's play the track, and then we'll talk about it. That's where I looped the track right there. So there's a lot going on in this track, and I used a lot more live instruments than I normally have time for. It was important to me to try and emulate the style of Ennio Morricone, and there's a lot of humanity in it because it's kind of sloppy in parts. It's not necessarily in the execution. It's just recording from disparate sources. You're going to get kind of varying degrees of quality. There's a lot of kind of charm and character in everything not sounding absolutely perfect. And when you hear me playing guitar, which I don't really play, you're going to know that perfection was definitely not ever possible. So the first thing let's look at is this guitar running through a guitar rig processor, which takes an electric guitar and makes it sound more like it's running through amplifiers and stuff. So I just plugged my electric guitar into my audio interface, and it's running through these processors here. A little bit of a delay on it. It's got a twang reverb coming out with the vibrato right there. Basically treated to sound a little more kind of like surf rock kind of style, which at the time it was a popular sound. The 50s, like the Safaris and Dick Dale. Guitar here. Got some dirt on it. It's got that tremolo, the da ya 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 ya. It was a nice feature sound for it. I do not play guitar, so go easy on me in the comments. But I thought I could get close enough to that sort of idea. I also didn't write any parts that were, way outside of my comfort level. And as you can tell, there's a lot. I redid a lot of these parts or things that I couldn't get my hand, back and forth fast enough to. I just did a lot of overdubbing because that's my prerogative. And this isn't really meant to be reproduced live, so I wasn't super concerned that I was going to be able to play it live. Yeah, so I mean, there's plenty of slop in there, and I think that only lends to its credibility. I got an acoustic guitar part. This is pretty cringeworthy. I was going to take it out, but honestly, with everything else in there, I thought it lent some more credibility to it. One of the other elements that I borrowed from the spaghetti western music is this ocarina, which video game fans will probably know from the Zelda series. It's a little clay pipe, and it's really only got 4 holes on top, and I think there's one on the bottom for octaves. And you blow into it, and it's kind of like a recorder or a whistle. It's got a very unique sound. Certain notes of the scale are pretty far out of tune, and you have to kind of try and bend them with the air pressure that you're using. And I'm not an ocarina player, so that's outside my experience level as well. But again, I didn't think that it necessarily needed to sound, or it even should sound like it was being played by a professional. It's kind of taking a lot of cues from folk music, and that's not necessarily played by professionals. It's just played by ordinary folk. So here is the ocarina. So that's obviously emulating, some of that famous spaghetti western kind of feels. Here's another line. Yours truly putting some vibrato on there. I think it sounds pretty good. Some of the notes are obviously out of tune, but again, just goes more towards the authenticity of it. It was a lot of fun to play. I had to learn each one of those notes and try and, the fingerings for each one just on those 4 holes. I play trumpet, but I don't play any woodwinds, at least very well. And it was a fun little challenge, learning where the notes are. And I probably worked on that, and re-recorded it over and over and over again until I got it, relatively close. Another element of the spaghetti western kind of music is a lot of vocals and vocal effects. So here's a part, I just tripled up vocals on this. Hee ha ho! Hee ha ho! You can even hear my studio chair creaking in the background here. So don't tell me that you're not getting to see how the sausage is made. This is behind the curtain in Oz kind of stuff. So these parts are just, they're nonsense lyrics. They don't mean anything, but they add to the vibe of it. I suppose it's trying kind of in a sort of stereotypical way to emulate maybe Native American chanting or something like that. And so I'm emulating the emulation, I suppose. But this is fun to do. Thinking of the voice as a more of a percussive element, more of a textural thing rather than, notes and a musical instrument. Here in the next part, I pull out all the stops and record myself singing the background chords here. Obviously not great singing. Although I sing much more than I play guitar or ocarina, I'm still not really a professional singer, although I suppose I got paid for this. So, hey, I'm a professional singer. I'm going more for authenticity here than, amazing vocal performance. I find that the more enthusiastic you are, the more successful it tends to be. This isn't life or death. This is, a fun game. So we're having fun with the music here a little bit. And I think it's okay to be caught on recording having fun. And then some more here at the end. the more live instruments you can put into a piece, the more real and human it feels. And since this is such a well-established genre, I wanted it to feel more human. Yet another part harkened back to the spaghetti western days was these orchestra bells. I think that's harkening back to the the small churches that would have been would have popped up around the small western towns as they grew up. It's kind of musical shorthand of suggesting that time and place. This one's a little more on the comedy side, but this is called a vibroslap. It's an auxiliary percussion instrument. It's made of a little steel bar that's weighted as such as when you hit the ball on one side of it, the other side kind of vibrates back and forth, and it's got these little clickers inside that give you this sound. And it, again, you're trying to suggest a time and a place. In this case, like the western, desert, where there's a lot of rattlesnakes, and that sounds like a rattlesnake. But Aaron Copland was an American composer, and he wrote a lot of stuff that it emulated and it established an American style of music. That came out of a lot of the same tradition. The harmonies and the kind of rousing rhythms of horse hoof beats, on the ground. Duck, 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 duck. A lot of his music, used a lot of this American imagery to establish a sound. And I think, to some degree, these are both Ennio Morricone's spaghetti western music and Aaron Copland stuff are sharing a lot of the same techniques. I actually did play this trumpet part originally, and then I just wanted it to be played a little bit better. So I brought in a friend of mine, Toby, who is a really good trumpet player. So here's Toby's excellent playing. It's a nice big burn on that sound there. The hya was from another vocal track. It's actually on the ocarina track, but I was probably just feeling it right there, and so I screamed, and then I think I liked it, so I left it in. So right there, the guitar, the twang guitar track is also playing the same part. So some neat synchronicity between two instruments that don't necessarily usually get to play together. They get the trumpet and the guitar. Here's got an anvil sound going on. That's probably the town blacksmith hammering another horseshoe. And one part that you probably almost didn't even hear was this jaw harp down here. It's an old instrument. If you haven't seen it, it's probably safer not to go investigate and learn how to play it. A lot of dentists used to enjoy selling people these because people would chip their teeth on them all the time while they were playing. You hold the metal part between your teeth and you flick this little metal bar back and forth. And a lot of times, if you weren't careful, you could, smack yourself in the lip or on the tooth and, chip a tooth or something like that. I have a recording of a buddy that we made in his studio where we were recording something. It was for a game about trains. And so we were using these kind of old American Western instruments, and he happened to have a jaw harp sitting around, so we went in and recorded it. And I have a great recording of him playing it and then hitting his tooth and kind of cursing himself out because it hurt. So just be very cautious using that. So don't try this at home. All right, guys, that's about all I've got for this one. This piece was actually suggested by a comment in an old video. So I am trying to listen to what you guys want to see and what you find interesting. Let me know if I'm being successful at that down below in the comments. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I am getting slowly around to some older video game tracks that I've written, like this one. Some of the stuff that's even older than this is taking some more time just because I'm having to find older sounds and borrow some gear from friends. So it's taking a little bit longer to get that done. Thanks, guys. See you next time.